Japan's notorious organized crime syndicates, the yakuza, have seen their power and ranks erode after decades of crackdowns. Well, they had more than 90,000 members 3 decades ago, but as of the end of 2022, that number had plummeted to about 22,000. That's according to the National Police Agency. But those who quit face stigma and legal barriers to rejoining society. Well, CNA's Michiyo Ishida speaks to a former yakuza.
A finger that's cut off at the joint and skin covered in tattoos. 53-year-old Tatsuya Shindo's body bears telltale scars of his past as a yakuza.
覚醒剤系大麻もやったし、でも主な資金源は覚醒剤かな。
His induction into Japan's underworld mirrors that of many youngsters who went down the wrong path. Tatsuya Shindo was a juvenile delinquent. He was expelled from high school for a year due to a quarrel, and he went to prison. He was scouted to join a crime syndicate. In 10 years, he climbed to a deputy leadership role of a crime syndicate. Then he overdosed himself taking illegal drugs and was arrested 3 times. The turning point came when he was in jail. Mr. Shindo saw other convicts reading the Bible and asked his wife to bring him one.
エゼキエルの33章の11節というところで私は改心したんですけどね。神は悪人が主の喜ばない。かえってその悪人がその態度を悔い改めて生きることを神は喜ぶって。立ち返れ立ち返れお前の悪しき道から。ヤクザにぴったりでしょ？ぴったりですね。
But Japanese society is not generally tolerant of former yakuza seeking redemption. Mr. Shindo's gang abandoned him because of his drug addiction, and after his release, he had to hide his past and tattoos to take up odd jobs.
真夏の暑い時にも汗でも潮吹くんですよ、白くね。着替える時に裸になった時に社長入ってきて、やばいまたこれでクビだと思った時に社長がね、だからお前頑張ってんだなって一言言ってくれたのね。で僕はもうそこで助かったし、人を大事にしていこうって、そういう社長さんがいたからこそ頑張れた。
Mr. Shindo says his faith also kept him from giving up. He studied at a seminary in the evenings, where he met his mentor, Pastor Yuichiro Nakano. In 2005, he made the unlikely transition from yakuza to pastor. Today he runs his own church in Saitama, where he was raised. On the day I was at church, there were more than 30 people who came to see Pastor Shindo and his mentor. Many are outcasts. They include former drug addicts, rapists, and yakuza. Pastor Shindo says it's now harder for them to get a second chance compared to the time when he was a yakuza more than 20 years ago.
5年間契約できないとか、クレジットカードを作れない、部屋も借りれない、ね、車のローンも取らない、ね、あるいは通帳作れない。今通帳作れなかったらどこも就職できませんよ。振り込みなんだからバレるわけです。なんで通帳持ってないのって。
The yakuza turned pastor wants to help ex-convicts turn their lives around. He preaches at prisons and also gives sermons at other churches in the hope that more people will accept them into their community. His actions are changing perceptions of former yakuza.
I was a little bit scared to see. But when I went to his church for the first time and met him, and he right away told me that, "Hey, Pastor Matsumura, I'm so happy to see you. I've been waiting for this chance." So my heart melted like ice cream. So since then, I've been good friends of him.
Pastor Shindo's personal life has not been smooth sailing. He had a mental breakdown after losing a daughter to suicide in 2017. But having a purpose helped him bounce back.
幸せですよ。最高幸せ。っていうか前科者がこうやって偉そうに人の前で話してさ、人の人生のために何かちょっとでも1ミリでもちょっとでも 協力できるっていうね、真似事ができてるのは本当幸せなことだなと思います。はい。
Now he's finding a new purpose, providing aid to victims of the deadly New Year's Day earthquake in Noto Peninsula. Michiyo, Ishida, CNA, Saitama.
Now for more, we are joined by Martina Baradell, Marie Sklodowska-Curie Global Fellows of Sociology at University of Oxford, as well as CNA's Japan correspondent Michiyo Ishida, and she joins us from Tokyo. So let's start with you first, Michiyo. There we heard Mr. Shindo saying that it's harder for them to get a second chance than before, say, 20 years ago. Why is that the case? I mean, why hasn't sort of society moved on and become more accepting over the years?
Well, there are former Yakuza turned famous authors, lawyers, and pastors, but the Japanese people generally do not easily accept those who are in jail, whether a Yakuza or not. Financial institutes do not want to issue bank accounts, although the police want their cooperation if the person has already left the crime syndicate. And without a bank account, they can't pay for smartphones, for instance. And I heard of a case of a former Yakuza after 10 years was refused from getting a driver's license. And how is he supposed to move around if he had a job in the rural area? Now, Pastor Shindo said after he left prison, he was careful not to show his tattoo to restart his life. There are many places in Japan still that ban those with tattoos, like public baths, swimming pools. So it's difficult for these former Yakuza to go to places with their family. And his current friend, Pastor Matsumura, as you just heard, was scared of Pastor Shindo before they met, just because he was a Yakuza.
Right. Dr. Baradell, let's bring you in here. I want to talk about this massive decline in the Yakuza in terms of their membership. And I believe that you've got a new research project that you are looking to perhaps identify some of the factors that perhaps lead to the emergence of new crimes, for instance, when there is this power vacuum. So what have you uncovered so far?
Yes, my research at the moment is to look at what is happening at the criminal situation in Japan. I think that, yes, numbers, they have dropped immensely, but we should also remember that maybe this is not the real situation of crime in Japan. A lot of people who leave the Yakuza, as we have just heard, cannot really reintegrate into society. So there is no official statistic. Another researcher, Dr. Hirosue, he made a survey, and from his estimation, we know that around 5% who leave the Yakuza can find, let's say, an official, occupation, like an official job. So 95% of the people who leave the Yakuza are still somewhat involved with crime. So I think the image we have now, of course, number went down. Of course, the Yakuza is getting weaker, but I don't think it is as realistic as it is usually portrayed.
So, Michiyo, like what Dr. Baradell was saying, that a large number of them are sort of still involved, in the gang, even though they have left. I mean, is that a problem? I mean, it is quite difficult for a member to leave the organization in the first place.
Yes, it seems like, Japan is known for its low crime rate. When you hear of murders, violence, shooting, the general public usually associate them to Yakuza. So the people are still very much afraid of Yakuza today, even though the numbers are reported to be dwindling. The top reason for the arrest of Yakuzas reported to be for possessing stimulants, involved in scams, according to the police agency. They are believed to need the money to, first of all, pay into their organization, which is a requirement. I spoke to sociologist Professor Daizaburo Hashizume, and he thinks that the Yakuza are facing difficulty collecting funds to contribute to their organization. And they used to threaten people to procure funds, overcharge them for loans. But with the crime syndicate law in place, members of recognized criminal groups can be arrested for such acts. So Yakuza today have to be much more careful. Otherwise, they will be easily arrested. Now, I have a question to Dr. Baradell. Pastor Shindo, who I've spoken to, a former Yakuza, said he thinks Yakuzas will disappear in 2 to 3 decades. Do you agree with his perspective?
I know Pastor Shindo very well, actually. And I've asked this question to many people, to many Yakuza and then ex-Yakuza as well. Will the Yakuza disappear? I think it will change. The Japanese crime landscape will change quite a lot, but at the moment we are still in a moment of reorganization. So the Yakuza is still, let's say, the core, is still the group that can control crime in Japan. You know, in the underworld, a lot of illegal markets are still controlled by the Yakuza. The question now is that how will they use people who are not Yakuza? So, as you said, it is very dangerous for the Yakuza now to do crimes as selling drugs and doing frauds. So what we are seeing is that they use people who are not formally members of the Yakuza to do this type of crimes. So the change happened in the past, like from 2010, 2011, when these new regulations came out. And I think now is just the moment where we will start seeing something. But I think the Yakuza will stay and will be able to control the Japanese underworld for a few more decades.
Well, a few more decades, that's interesting. Dr. Baradell, earlier Michiyo was mentioning about how, it takes at least 5 years for an ex-member to get a bank account, and in some cases, even children, they've been excluded from community activities. So in terms of the government, the Japanese government, what are they doing? I mean, or is there law enforcement to sort of, help the Yakuzas reform and reintegrate into society, or they are just hands off on this matter?
I think from my, talking with the police as well, I think there are more people in the police who realize that there is need for these people to be reintegrated if you want to stop them joining again some other form of crime. So I think a lot of people are realizing that the official changes are not there yet, but I think I hope at least that there will be pushes to do that, because this 5-year rule that even if you leave the Yakuza, you are your hands are tied. As it was said before, it is very difficult to be reintegrated if you had been in prison, let alone if you are a Yakuza. So a lot of private groups like Shindo's group, a lot of religious groups, even groups that are not related with religion, like charities, they do offer this support. But it is always private initiatives. So I think there should be, there is the need for the state to intervene a little bit more hands-on to prevent people from rejoining, if not the Yakuza, even other forms of crime, which probably is even worse than the Yakuza.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Michiyo, from your conversation with Mr. Shindo, I mean, he managed to find faith, right, with a seminary to sort of overcome his depression and all of that. But what about other former Yakuza members? I mean, how do they overcome the stigma and the social, being ostracized, basically, that comes with their past affiliation?
Well, Pastor Shindo, as we just heard, was introduced to the Bible. He met a pastor who eventually became his mentor at the seminary, and he overcame his situation. And he's actually helping a lot of former Yakuza and prisoners who are not easily accepted in society. I met a few of them at his church, and they were trying to acclimatize with society. For instance, helping out with disaster relief efforts with Pastor Shindo. But, what the pastor stressed to me was that they actually served their term in prison. And so society should give them a chance to restart their lives. Now, again, Dr. Baradell, I'd like to ask you, do you think the Japanese public can actually change their mindset to accommodate former Yakuza into society from your observation?
I think it is a little bit difficult, to be honest. I don't see how there could be such a cultural shift. It has been, even for younger people, I know also people who did some mistakes when they were teenagers, and you can see how the kind of repercussions they have, when they become young adults. I have no answer as to how it would be possible, but certainly it is necessary because even if you are an ex-convict and you can find a job, still, the need to be reintegrated into society is like a very important one. So it is really necessary for the government to work on this as well.
So, Dr. Baradell, all in, do you think the goal of cracking down on organized criminal groups in Japan has worked, because with the Yakuza numbers coming down, or are there other major gangs coming up?
I don't think there is any major gang coming up. I know there have been a lot of talks about, especially Chinese gangs. There have been some incidents in the past couple of years. But the way, the Yakuza has always been quite monopolistic, and they have been able to control most of the illegal markets. So at the moment, there is still no kind of opponent, let's say big opponent for the Yakuza. It is quite difficult that criminal groups from abroad just move to Japan. They might move, for example, to do, a smuggling operation, to do one operation, but the control that the Yakuza has on the territory has waned, but they are still the main player there.
All right, that's a great discussion there. Thanks so very much, Dr. Baradell, and also Michiyo, for chatting with us this evening.